Good evening. Welcome to Bobe's Hobby House. I'm Terry Bobe, and tonight I have as a guest Bob Hemp. Bob has just come back from the National Model Airplane Contest with all the cookies in his bag. Bob won first place in the Scale Radio Control Model Airplane Contest, and we have that winning model here this evening along with Bob to explain how this was done. Bob, it's good to have you here.
Well, thank you, Terry. It's always a pleasure to talk about the airplanes, something I find very easy to talk about. Yes, I did return from Lincoln, where I competed in the National Model Airplane Contest and managed to win first place in the sport scale event. It was a culmination of 2 weeks of fine model airplane flying and adverse weather conditions, to say the least. The wind blew 40 to 45 miles an hour.
And traditionally, normal people don't like to fly their model airplanes in 40-mile-an-hour winds.
No, in essence, it amounted to about 120-mile-an-hour scale winds for these models, since it was a quarter scale, so 4 times 40 mile an hour was quite a feat.
Okay, the model you have here tonight, this is a Fokker D8. This is a veteran of World War I, someplace along there.
This particular airplane is a Fokker D8. It started out as a Fokker E5. It was an early modification of a D8, and I've done it up in Polish markings. It was flown by a Polish aviator, Stefan Stek, in 1919 in the number 7 Kosciuszko Squadron, excuse me. The Polish Air Force came to be after World War I when the land was reclaimed from the Germans, and they ran onto an aerodrome that had something like 110, 120 airplanes in them, and there were 6 or 7 of the D8 sitting in there, and so the Polish folks then claimed them for their own, and from this date forward, this was the national Polish markings, the red and white chessboard, and the fella Stek put his personal insignia on the side with the S to designate his own airplane. The interesting thing about Stek was, in 1919, the Poles were fighting the Ukrainians, and he shot down a Newport with this particular model. It must have been a short-lived war. But
there was a lot of turmoil following World War I, and that this was a pretty advanced aircraft for World War I aviation.
Very advanced. It came out right at the end of the war, and it really wasn't tested. It was a machine that I think it showed up in the last several months of World War I, and it really didn't see a whole lot of combat.
Right.
So they really didn't know the versatility of the airplane. Actually, it went on for just a short time, you know, in between, right after the war, and really never really served its usefulness as a German fighter type airplane.
Mm-hmm. That this was the common World War I airplane would have been a biplane for the most part.
Yes.
And this was a radical departure from that. And I think it gained the nickname of the Flying Razor Blade because its frontal area was so very thin.
Yes.
Compared to what was going on at the time.
Yes, it was a real departure for Anthony Fokker. You know, he had a string of 3 or 4 different very successful models, and the first one being a D7, and then he came along with the tri-wing DR1, and then this was the final one of that series, and this one was called an E5 originally. And they had some wing problems. In factory manufacture, they didn't do all their homework in nailing the top skins on the wing, and they were having wing failures, and when they went back and shored up the workmanship in the factory, the airplane then came out redesignated a Fokker D8, and it was commonly called the Flying Razor.
Great. There's some interesting things about this. One is the rotary engine that powered these things didn't have a throttle. It was an on and off kind of a thing, and the propeller was fastened to the crankcase of the engine. The whole engine would spin along with the prop,
right,
which must have been exciting as far as torque is concerned.
Some engines along these lines did have carburetors, and some didn't. Like you mentioned, they had a blip switch, and what they would do is they would cut out the cylinders. Most of these engines were either 9 or 11 cylindered engines, and they would just cut out 3 or 4 cylinders. And I read an interesting thing today, I think, that you mentioned to me before. These engines were all lubricated with castor oil, and these pilots were subject to the fumes and it was just about like taking a laxative, you know, from sniffing the fumes of the castor oil the whole time that they were flying. So it was quite a challenge for those fellas.
Kept them clean inside for sure. That's the wooden prop. What kind of the detail that you have to go on this? Is this a this is obviously not a beginning thing. Now the newspaper over in Foley did an article about your model building, and in that article they mentioned that you've been building models for a long time.
Yes, almost 50 years. I started out as a youngster of, I think, of around 7 or 8 when I built my first model airplane, and I progressed through the stages from solid models through rubber band on up into gasoline-powered airplanes, and then finally progressed into the scale. And I've really been into heavy competition with the scale airplanes now for about 6 or 7 years, and it's really my real love. The scale models to me represent a work of art, and the flying skills involved, and it's just when you go to a meet, a scale-type model airplane contest, every model sitting there was built by the fellow who was flying it, and they're all works of love, you know, and the fellows have poured their heart and soul into them. I do want to say on my own behalf, the week prior to the National Model Airplane Contest, the United States selected 3 members to compete in Italy in 1988, and I was lucky enough to win the #2 spot. So my wife and I will be journeying to Italy in September of '88, and 3 of us will represent the United States in a world competition.
Right, and you've referred to this as the Olympics of model airplane flying.
It is really the Olympics of model airplaning, because we do represent the United States, and there will be approximately 40 different countries of 3-man teams competing for the World Championships of radio control scale modeling.
Congratulations again. That's really an exciting part of it. That in that you've won a free airplane ticket and that part to go out there along with all the other. And I know that's an even greater challenge, because that's some pretty formidable competition out there. Bob, one of the things that I wanted to point out in asking how long that you've been doing this is the fact that this is not a first-time model airplane. This is not something you shake out of the box. It doesn't come this way. What's involved in building a scale model?
Well, this particular airplane was built off a set of plans. Most of my airplanes are scratch-built model airplanes. A fellow gets
When you're saying scratch-built,
it means that you cut everything basically yourself. On this particular airplane, the only thing that was manufactured were the wheels and the pilot and the machine guns, and naturally the engine and the radio. All the rest of it I hand fabricated myself from a set of 4-sheeted plans that I got from a fellow in California. And the airplane is built out of basically balsa wood and basswood. And I made templates to cut the ribs, and the fuselage is basically just squared up with longerons, and it's a very simple type construction. I built this particular airplane in about 3 months, and it only represents maybe 600 or 700 hours. We haven't talked about the T-34. The T-34, on the other hand, is a very complex airplane. It represents maybe 1,500 hours of construction, and it just is a really complicated airplane. World War I types were crewed. The real airplanes were crewed individually, handmade airplanes, and you know, I tried to show this in my model and not sand everything down to the nth degree, and it's supposed to look a little crude because those airplanes were crude.
That's one of the fellows mentioned when you came in the studio with these models. Is there a possibility that you're a full-scale aviator? You've been a naval aviator prior to the model aviation, or do they mix? Is that a prerequisite to being a naval aviator?
No.
Should you be a model builder first?
I think there are a lot of naval aviators, not a lot of aviators in general, Air Force, Marine, and naval aviators who cut their teeth with models. I think my love of airplanes certainly led me to the career in naval aviation, and I don't know why. I just happened to pick the Navy. I always thought the whites and the carriers were very attractive, and the palm trees waving in the background.
Yeah.
But aviation has been a part of my life, and for the present time, I no longer fly the real size ones. I've resigned myself to just flying the models. and every crash that occurs, I walk away from them all, so to speak.
There's not much way you can get hurt in this unless you hit yourself with the airplane.
Right.
On the T-34, we were talking about the rivet detail. Now, this is detail that comes in this kind of a kit. Again, this is not a part of the model originally. You've added the rivet detail, you've added, there's just so many little bits and pieces that you've added to it that were not a part of the kit. The rivets, we were talking, those are little droplets of glue.
Yes.
I know you know what the number of those are or something.
Well, I don't really know what the number of these are, but when I planned on making the T-34, I went out to Whiting Field and got permission from the Navy to make a study of the airplane. I took maybe 150 photographs of the real airplane and crawled all over the wings and fuselage, measuring panel lines and rivet detail, and I became a big student of this airplane. I spent no less than maybe 50, 60 hours crawling over the real thing to duplicate my model as close as I could to the real airplane. This is the first of two. This is sort of a learning vehicle type airplane, and I have a second one under construction that I hope to compete with in Las Vegas the first week in November, and it is really museum quality. The mistakes that I made on the first model, I incorporated in the, I corrected in the second airplane. And for instance, you mentioned the rivet detail. The rivets on this particular airplane are done with white glue with a toothpick, one drop at a time. I used a dressmaker's tool and notched out the second and third tooth on it, and then rubbed it on a piece of carbon paper and ran it down the line to get the spacing. And then with the white glue, you put it on one drop at a time, and it sounds like a long, laborious process, but the beauty of it is if you don't like one particular rivet, you can wipe it off immediately and then go on with your business. On my second airplane, to incorporate the rivets and get a very even flow of the rivets, I used escutcheon pins, and
that's little tiny straight pin looking affair.
They are brass brads that have a rounded head to simulate the rivets, and I actually counted the number of them I put on the wing, and it amounted to 5,000.
Okay, Bob, we're going to take a break, and we'll come back and we'll be ready to answer questions about building scale models and just flying scale models in general. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Bobe's Hobby House. We're coming up to the second half, and we've got a shot here at talking to Bob Hamp, the U.S. team member going to Italy next year and the current national champion scale model, radio control builder and flyer. And I always like to stress those two together. We've joked a lot of times over at the hobby shop behind the counter saying, if you want to see a model airplane crash, the chances are best if you go to a scale model contest. And the reason for that seems to be that the fellow spent a lot of time building his scale model and may not have spent a lot of time flying the model. Bob, you've got some solves for that. I understand you go out and do quite a lot of flying.
Well, I do practice a lot. For instance, this particular model here I finished about the first week in May, and the National Model Airplane Contest was the first week in July, and in a period of like 3 weeks I flew at 135 flights. So I flew it 11 days in a row, and generally my practice sessions amount to 6 or 7 flights in a session. But I believe in flying a whole lot. I fly almost every weekend, generally on Saturday. And prior to contest, I practice constantly. I'm retired, and I have, my own time, so to speak. So I have a definite advantage on a lot of fellows around the country that don't have that kind of time to devote to it. Right. But I do believe in knowing the model well and flying it a whole lot, and it's paid off for me.
It really has. One of the things that, I don't know if I should say this is kind of a joke around the neighborhood, but Bob flies with an intensity unlike the average Sunday afternoon flyer. Now, we joke a lot of times with people coming up on a fellow who's flying a model airplane, and they say, go ahead and ask the guy a question, but don't do it while he's flying the airplane. Now, when Bob's flying the airplane, you don't even want to talk to him. Okay, we've got a call here. You're on Bobe's Hobby House.
Yes. Do you have any information about the Stearman?
A Stearman.
Yes, sir.
We have some information back at the shop. If you'd like to check with us there, we'll be glad to give you help with that.
Well, I don't know about that. But...
Okay. Thank you for the call.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we've got another call here. You're on Bobe's Hobby House.
Do you have any F-14 Tomcats or P-51 Mustangs?
Okay, let me answer that on the air. Everybody dreams about the latest macho super fighter, and of course the P-51, even though this is a Navy town and you're supposed to say F-4U Corsair, the P-51 is probably one of the all-time favorite model airplanes. It's a fighter that made a lot of history in World War II. One of the things that I wanted to stress to you young people who are calling just now especially, keep this out there as a goal, but please don't start with a scale model as the first airplane. I'm afraid that if you pursue that kind of a thing, you'll not be met with the kind of success that we really want you to have. Learn to fly first, and then go to the learn to build scale. Bob, you've said you've been building scale model intently, or competing intently, for about the last 5 years, and you're rating that scale competition as somehow different from just building a scale model. What kind of differences do you see there?
Well, you know, I think somewhere around 80% of the model airplanes that are sold are in essence some form of scale model airplane, you know, and then depending upon the intensity of the scale model that you want to build, you know, I tell new people that want to build a scale model airplane, they should pick and fly it, they should pick a fairly simple model, basically something like a J3 Cub, and not devote a lot of time, do a nice job on it, and get some fun out of flying the airplane rather than dwelling on, you know, getting every little nut and bolt right in it. But build a model to your satisfaction, and then don't get too attached to it, but have some fun flying it. And then if you really like the hobby, I mean the hobby of competing with the model, go to a contest and more or less get your feet wet, and then determine how much you want to do, you know, and then you can take off from there. There are different categories of competition, and there's one for novice flyers just for this purpose, for folks, so to speak, to get their feet wet. And then as you whet your appetite, your level of intensity goes up until you're running with the fast set, so to speak. And I've been in that stream for about 5 years now, and I've run against the best modelers in the country, and I love it. You did say that you don't talk to me. That's not true at all. I've developed...
Not while you're flying.
I've developed a rapport with the judges, and with my German airplanes, I have a running dialogue that I give them that this guy is up on early morning or mid-morning or afternoon sortie, and I tell them all about it. And if I make a particularly bad landing, I'm very prone to say that the guy had too much schnapps the night before, and it sets real good.
This is a piece that you did that turned up on National Geographic television.
Yes, absolutely.
A little earlier in the year, and it showed to advantage how a landing that wouldn't have been something to be proud of necessarily, either by a model airplane or a full-scale pilot, and you covered that very well with the act that goes with the rest of the thing. Okay, we've got another call. You're on Bobe's Hobby House.
Yes, I was wondering if you could tell me the name and give me a phone number of a radio control club in the area. I'm just new in the area, and I'd like to get involved with the radio control airplane.
Okay, as it happens, there are 2 clubs in the area. We've got one that meets up at Bobe's Hobby House on the second Tuesday each week. This is the Pensacola Aero Modelers, and Ken will get me if I don't say that right. The other group is Northwest Florida Radio Control Models. Okay, I stumble over these words. They're groups that have been in the town for years. Both of the groups are very active. Some of them involve the same people. There are a lot of places. The Navy's been good to us, letting us use fields around town. They obligate us to have the AMA insurance so that the Navy not be held liable for any damage that might be done with these airplanes. It's a requirement that we fly AMA insurance anytime we're doing this. So yes, there are clubs in town, a lot of activity, a lot of contests coming up even still. So get in contact with us at Bobe's Hobby House and and we can pass you right along to those club groups.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for the call.
Okay.
Bob, the club activity kind of thing, this is more an individual effort, or are you supported somewhat by the encouragement from the other model builders also?
Well, mine is more or less a Lone Eagle type operation. I think there are roughly 300 radio control flyers in the city of Pensacola. As far as I know, I'm the only active competition type scale flyer. Pensacola is blessed with a wealth of good flyers, but it just seems that most of them are what you call fun flyers. They enjoy going out on Saturday and Sunday and just flying for their own enjoyment. There's
some other aspects of the flying, because we have some pretty good glider pilots in the area that compete nationally, and we've got some free flight guys. Tommy McLaughlin is good enough. He's on display in the Smithsonian Institute.
Right.
So we've got Pensacola is a real strong area for aviation, any size. It doesn't matter which. You're on Bobe's Hobby House.
Yes, I'm interested in radio control cars.
Great.
What I'd like to know is, would it be better to buy a new radio control car, or would it be better to buy a used one from somebody else, and what should I look for if I was buying a used one?
Okay, we'll pick that up. That's like buying any other kind of a car. If you're buying a used car, there's some risk that you take. If you're buying a new car, there's still some risk you can take. If you'd like to give us a shout over at Bobe's Hobby House, ask for Ken Parker on weekdays. He can give you a hand on that. He speaks cars very fluently. Bob, we've had a real good time having you come out. Somebody asked on the break about your T-34. We have it resting on the ground because the landing gear is folded up, so that's another function. You have 7 or 8 functions on this?
This particular airplane, the functions of this airplane are the normal throttle control, aileron control, elevator control, rudder control. It also has retractable gear with 7 operational gear doors, and then it has flaps. So in essence, this is a six control model airplane. It's operated off an 8-channel transmitter, so I have room for a couple of more functions, but I just haven't found a need for any of them. For instance, I might drop a bomb or do some other kind of function, but at the present time, this is just a basic 6.
Slide the canopy open, eject the pilot.
Yes, they do that. They have models that the canopies come open on the rollout. Some model airplanes have wings that fold, only one that I know of. On another Fokker D8 that I had like this, I had mechanical machine gun sounds were operated off of a Radio Shack chip, and it was powered by 2 9-volt batteries. That was kind of unique.
Okay.
But there are many different, you kind of let your conscience be your guide as far as what kind of functions you get on your airplane.
Okay, Bob, it's been a delight having you with us. I want to wish you really good luck, and I'm looking forward to more from you from over in Italy. Those of you that may have questions about radio control flying at any level, we'd be glad to talk to you at Bobe's Hobby House, and other arts and crafts and hobbies in there, so we can help you with those too. Got some leisure time, we can help. Good evening, and have a good time with your hobby.